So, the theology in that wonderful hymn, Trust and Obey, there is no other way to be happy in Jesus. Growing up, I always thought that was a weird lyric. To be happy in Jesus. I don't know why. I'm not sure why that came off as weird to me. Now as an adult, it still hasn't gotten a whole lot better. But there's an understanding of two things, and it's what we talked about last week, Lord's Day 7, what is true faith, right? It is not only a knowledge, but a conviction, really boiled down to trusting in Jesus and obeying his word. That if we're equating that with quote-unquote happiness, and maybe that's why I don't like it as much, is because happy is very temperamental, right? We can be happy one minute and we can be sad the next. How do I know? Have you guys ever watched those surprise return videos from veterans, those in the services, when they surprise, like, you're shaking your head, you know what I'm talking about. Like, within seconds, I am a mess. I am weeping, right? And more of joy. I don't know these people. I'll never meet them, but the joy they see in their kids thinking they're going to gym class, and then, like, one of the greatest ones was, I think he was 8 or 9 years old. He was going up to bat, and Dad, who had come home from being on tour for years, was the umpire. And he takes the mask off, and the boy doesn't really understand what's going on, then finally does, and he just kind of melts. I'm bawling, right, the entire time. I'm not 100% sure why I brought that up. Well, happiness, got it, being temporal. That, again, our happiness is fleeting. That this morning even, some of you might have woken up happy, some of you didn't. And then it's I don't know why, right? Hope I won't take that personally, like, oh, church again. But happiness, to be happy in Jesus is to trust and obey. And I guess happiness in Jesus really is one of the goals, right, Morgan? You are way happy in Jesus today, and that is exciting. Hopefully it comes with a good nap. Okay, but I'm preaching, so you're going to have to stop. Thank you. And so, no, just kidding. I love when kids make noises. Adults, not so much. Kids, yes. And so this idea of trusting and obey goes right into the heart of chapter 12. And like I said last week, we're on the home stretch. We have today, and then we have next week, and then we only have 2 more left. And then we're going to be done with this kind of 10,000-foot view of Hebrews. But really what chapter 12 is doing, it's standing on what we've kind of built as a foundation in chapter 11, which is faith, this understanding of faith. And it takes faith to be happy, right? To be happy in Jesus takes faith because it's a perspective, it's an understanding that the things we're going through right now are temporary. Now, I know as I say that, some of your body's just clenched because you've been going through something for maybe years and years and years. Maybe it's a physical illness. Maybe it's a hurt relationship. I don't know what it is. But you're going, okay, any time now, God, would be great. I want to be happy about this again. And I'm going to start with really, it's a punch to all of us. Your happiness is not God's main goal. That our happiness in Jesus should come when we are engaged in the things of Christ. So if you're not happy in life right now, take stock of what you're doing in life. Are you doing things that are actually causing you pain? Are you doing things that are actually causing you the opposite of happiness? Because a lot of times the happiness problem is actually an us problem, yet we love to put it on God. God, I'm not happy, and it's your fault. Right? I liken that to anyone who has preteens or teenagers. Okay, Holly, I'm looking at you, right? When your kids come and say, Mom, I'm mad or I'm not happy, you probably have one of many emotions. One is, what can I do to fix it? And the other one is, I could care less. And so and somewhere in between. I know Holly, and she leans on the former more than the latter. But there's an understanding that when our kids always desire to be happy as parents, it's exhausting. That at times, your kid's just not going to be happy because happiness is temporary. It is fleeting. This idea of this too shall end, both sides of the coin, good things and bad. And so what the first 11 chapters of the book of Hebrews have done is really given us a foundation of why Jesus is the best, right? Why Jesus is greater than Moses, Jesus is greater than angels, Jesus is greater than the prophets, Jesus is the greatest covenant that he has done, the writer of Hebrews, for us and for the writers in this time, or for the readers in this time, or more so listeners, is that Jesus is the best. Why would we go anywhere else? Why would we subscribe to any other belief system? It's Jesus, period, end of discussion. Yet even some of us in here struggle with that. Some of you online struggle with that today. Is Jesus the best? Because what I'm dealing with right now is not the best. So if Jesus is the best, but I'm dealing with junk right now, and I'm a follower of Jesus, then maybe Jesus is junk. That some of us have that weird algorithm that what I'm feeling in the moment really tells me about who God is. Friend, that's not how it goes. It's never been about you. It's never been about me. It's been about trusting and obeying. Now I'm going to ask a question. What if it was obey and trust? Now, obviously, it wouldn't work for the songwriter because you're working on the rhyming and the flow and the melodies of the hymnist, and that's great. But what if it's trust and what if it was obey and then trust? Does that change it for you? Anybody? What? It's authoritarian. Interesting. I'd love for you to say more about it, but I want to hear from some other people. What if it wasn't trust and obey, but it was obey and trust? Say it again. Give your wife a high five. Most awkward high five ever. It's okay. You'll work on it. Come back next week. But it's dependent on me then. Trust and if it's obey and then trust, then if it's Jim, I'm not getting to trust if I have to obey. Spoiler alert, I didn't follow all the rules growing up. And if my trusting is based on my obeying, and I'm just going to be so bold and put out there, I don't think for a lot of us, even our firstborn rule followers, right, we'd probably fall short. I kind of like following the rules, but there are times I love breaking the rules. And I know you all feel the same way. But it's trust and obey. It's trusting that the Lord has you. It's trusting the plan that God has for you, that though you go through the ups and downs of life, trusting and obeying what he's saying. Because if we're obeying without trust, it's dependent on us. If we trust and obey, it's the relationship we have with God and how we are walking it out. It starts to dissect the things we do in life. The way we love our spouses, the way we kind of run our households, the way we work in our jobs or run our business, down to the minuscule, the way we drive our cars and all of the way we talk to people or present ourselves online. That if we're known for being a trusting people in God first, because it's really hard sometimes to trust people. I get that. I've been hurt. You've been hurt. Sometimes it's hard. We forgive, but sometimes it's hard to trust. But if you're trusting that God is working all things out for good, then really, and this is the first truth, and then I'll start preaching, is that God's playing the long game. And so should we. Because I look out there and I know there are hundreds of stories of life right now not going well. Things going on. Some of you have taken it on the chin for the last 6 months, year, 2 years. An illness of a loved one, right? Understanding of definitions of family and job stuff and all of these things. And we're wondering, when am I going to be happy again? To be happy in Jesus is to trust and obey. Let's jump into the book of Hebrews. So we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 12. Now, I need to any runners out there, I'm going to start talking about you and asking you questions after I'm done reading this. So be ready. Don't run away. Thank you. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which easily clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. A well-known set of verses. James, you can put that one back up. Where are my runners? Those that ran track or ran cross country. Raise your hand. Raise it proud. Got one there. Well, we know Nikki. Yeah, absolutely. Right? We got some. There's not a lot of runners here. It's why one maybe in the back. Right? One of you are doing this. I don't know what that means. Like maybe you have my philosophy. I only run when I'm chased, and I only have to run faster than one other person. And so understanding, I love this church even more because 99% of you aren't runners, and we'll work on the other ones. But running, there's an endurance to running. I grew up in sports where running was a punishment. Wrestling, punishment. Football for one season, punishment. Baseball, absolutely a punishment. So no wonder I hate it, because it has been ingrained to me that you run when you do something wrong. Okay? Now, some of you that maybe have been chased by cops or whatever, police officers, you know that you're running because you did something wrong. But for all of you that like running, okay, and I think I saw which Demantis rose their hand. Sophia, you the runner, right? They both are. Okay, so what do you guys like about running? The active feeling? The after feeling? What? The after feeling for me, I'm throwing up. What is the after feeling is that called the runner's high? Right, I think I've heard that. I thought it was a joke. I love running for when I'm done running. That is, okay, but because you accomplished something, right? I feel that after like a pizza. And so similar feelings, very different things. Okay, but I know that running, you need to endure. I don't know if anybody woke up one morning, and Nikki, you can verify this. Does anyone just wake up one morning and go, I'm going to do the Chicago Marathon today? No. What about tomorrow? Okay, it takes time. Our good friend Nikki, right, she's like our little sister, Carrie and I, she runs a lot. Too much. But when she was the last marathon that she was training for, she invited people to join her on like different parts of the run. And I think you did it for your birthday. Just one of the strangest things I've ever heard in my life. Like, please join me on this run. And I asked her, I was like, what are you expecting from people? And she's like, I don't know, maybe a mile or two. I go, Melbrook's 1 block. I will give you to the end of Melbrook. And then you will continue on, and I will be proud of myself that I ran a block. But there's endurance. She's doing this to build up. And what the writer of Hebrews, and what in the first century, this would have made a lot more sense, because running was it. Right? They had the Olympics and different things of all these different events, and wrestling, javelin, all of those things. But running was like the creme de la creme. It was the greatest athlete that you could have was a runner. Another reason why I would not have made it in the first century. We'll just add that to the list of the reasons why. But running was such a big deal. The writer of Hebrews is saying something very specifically here. Because you just don't decide one day you're a runner and then not do anything. No couch potato ever said, my greatest hobby is running. No, that runners, you have to build up to it. That running, and especially running a race, is you have to do your due diligence in your training, right? I look over at the Wieringa girls, and they're in softball. Do you guys like to run? Yes? One saying no. I love them. They're great. But that's, for softball and baseball, you only have to sprint, right? And, we have Abacus, right? She hits bombs, and Homer, so she just gets to trot. But, like, for me, who didn't, I just had to sprint 90 feet. That's it. And then I was good. most of the times because I got thrown out, and so I didn't have to run. I was in the dugout. But understanding that running, you are enduring it. This is something that you have to endure. I've known people that have run marathons. That's 26.2 miles. That's insanity. You have a bike. You have a car. You have a scooter. You have rollerblades if it's 1993. Do that, right? It makes so much more sense, but they want to run. And I've heard wonderful stories of people that have finished. I've also heard horrible stories about people that didn't. But understand that to run something like that takes endurance. It takes encouragement. It takes an example. It takes a lot to run a race, encapsulated in these verses. And here's the thing. First century arenas, they would have the track, right? It's very similar if you go to like the local high school now. You have the track around the football field, and you have these grandstands on either side. It was very different in the first century. Yes, they had some grandstands on the sides, but the biggest one was in the front of the stadium. That the stadiums had these elevated seats. It's where the royalty was. Because when you ran, you weren't running for the people around you. You were running for the person in front of you. You were running for the royalty. Because for whatever reason, they were the ones that are giving the money, giving the freedom. You know, sometimes people ran to set themselves free, much like gladiators did, right, back in the day. And understanding that you weren't running for the people around you, you were running for the people in front of you, the royalty, the kings and the queens, it makes this verse really pop out. For we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. We had just come off the chapter about faith. And if we go to chapter 11, right, by faith, Abraham, by faith, Moses, by faith, the people crossed the Red Sea, the Israelites, by faith, Gideon and David and Samuel, by faith, by faith, by faith. Now, what the writer is saying is you have all of these people that have run their race, yet there is one for which you run. That's Jesus. Thank you, Siri. That's Jesus, the author and perfecter of your faith. Friends, that means something. That means your faith does not have to be defined by you, because then we're going to get into the obey and trust. If your faith is defined by what you want to define it about, it's going to be faith in self. It's not going to be faith in anybody else. Even if you're a real believer, you have that flesh side in you that loves to be worshiped. That flesh side inside of you that loves to sin. And if we're going to be the ones that author and perfect our faith, how can we perfect something as imperfect beings? It doesn't work. And so understanding that Jesus, the author and perfecter of the faith, for the joy set before him, we're looking to him because he ran his race. And it's such a beautiful set of verses. For the joy set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of God. That is the definition of your faith. Your faith is defined by Christ, your relationship with Christ, and his covenants with you, with us, with the church. And so what we have to understand is our duty is to trust the faith that God has set in our hearts. The Spirit has put in your hearts. We use the term regenerated in the Reformed faith. That faith has been made known to you. You don't come up with it, right? It's the joke that I think I tried a couple weeks ago. You know, it's like watching a URC church sing, "I've decided to follow Jesus." Wow, okay. That we don't necessarily believe that, right? I have Dan, well, he laughed, so that's good. But understand that we're taking the us out of it. I'm taking the you out of it. I'm taking the us out of it. Jesus had to set it first. We would not have known how to do this if it wasn't for Jesus. We couldn't say, well, I follow the faith of Moses. Nope. Why? Because he was fallible. He sinned. He disobeyed. Well, I follow the faith of Noah. Well, that's a good one. That's a good example, but he didn't go all the way. Jesus is the one that went all the way to the point of death. that he followed the Father's call for his life, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, despising its shame, and is seated at the right hand of God. James, next verses. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against him, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. That's huge. That Christ did it. Now, some of us, we still may, right? We think about the martyrs that have gone before us. You think about Jim Elliot. You think about those in the 1st and 2nd century that were put to death for their faith. The Roman Empire did a great job of killing most of the disciples in very ugly ways. You could go back and read about 10 of the 12 that were executed, martyred in really disgusting ways by the Romans. But they followed the example of Christ. And that's really easy to say in 2023 at 214 Ridge Road, because I look out and I go, Northwest Indiana, Chicagoland area, Midwest, we're all somewhat similar, right? There's not a lot of quote unquote. There is persecution going on. I don't want to say that, but we don't really have a group like the Roman Empire seeking us out in our homes to kill us. There are freedoms of religion in our country. There are freedoms of belief. Though we need to be on guard and though we need to keep an eye, because, there are some areas it's like, it's coming. It wasn't like this. Yet that is the example that our faith has been given and that we need to trust and obey. Because I don't know the future. I don't have a crystal ball, nor do we believe in that. But maybe some of us might walk our faith out to the point of shedding blood. Consider him who endured from the world that hated him, were raged against him, so that you may not grow weary or faint. This should really put in perspective your happiness. Right? I've said it before and I'll say it again. Right? The people that want to make every negative thing that happens in your life a spiritual matter, you have every right to do that. I think it's exhausting, right? Your flat tire isn't from the arrows of Satan. It's because your kid didn't pick up his bike and you ran over it. Taking it to the spiritual realm is fine. And if you're learning that way and that's how you want to engage, by all means, go ahead and do it. But get your tire fixed and have your kids clean up their toys better. And so understanding that there is an example set for us that my hope and my prayers will never have to go through. It doesn't mean we won't stand for truth, right? It doesn't mean that we won't speak life into dead people. It doesn't mean that we won't correct. The Word of God is used to rebuke and correct. Now, we can do that as a drive-by, right? And we could do that and say, you're a sinner, and throw your Bible at him and keep running, or if it's me, because I hate it, on my scooter. Or you can do it in relationship. You can sit down and have those conversations, and you can still hold the same accountability. You can still hold the same truth. But understand, we need to consider what Jesus went through, because that gives us our definition of how to do it. That we won't go weary or faint-hearted. I know some of you are today, and you're going, what in the world? I think I'm doing it right, but why am I weary? Why am I faint-hearted? Go a little step further. That it isn't to the point that Jesus got to. His friends betraying him. The people that he helped and he served and he saved turned their backs on him and put him on a cross. Well, that was the Romans and the Jews. Let's not worry about any of that. That the wrath of God was put on our Savior, and that should have been put on us. And we would not be able to handle that. But Jesus did. and 3 days he rose again, that you and I may have everlasting life. So I think it's worth our trusting and our obeying. I think it's worth that. Well, Pastor, I don't know. My life's pretty hard right now. Okay, let's talk about that. What can we do to get it to be a better place? Just because your world is hard right now doesn't mean Jesus didn't die and then 3 days later rise from the dead. It doesn't mean that 40 days later he gave the Great Commission that we're supposed to go out into all the world. Because we are. Even though you're having a bad day, you are still called to bring the gospel. Even though you may be in a bad rut of life, you are still called to be ambassadors of Christ. Because we trust and obey that his way is best. Let's keep going. And have you forgotten the exhortation addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary of when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves. He chastises every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you endure. God is treating you as sons and daughters. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? Hollendoner boys. For what son is there whom the father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we have respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as it seemed best to them. But he disciplines us for our good, for that we may share in his holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. Kids in the room, wake up, put whatever you have down, and look at Pastor. For this moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those that have been trained by it. How many people grew up in a house where spanking was the form of discipline? Okay, or a belt? Oh, keep your hands up. Don't feel bad, right? Yeah. Okay. I'm not even going to say belt buckle, right? Because that's a whole separate conversation. Now, how many of you tried to pad your jeans so that you didn't think, yep, Aaron over there, yep, oh, and your dad's right next to you. That's super awkward. And so, because we thought we could best the discipline. And yeah, it's a lot of parents say, this hurts me more than it hurts you. Right. But understand that the discipline is for a purpose. That discipline is there to correct us. Now, other translations, right, talk about this is a chiding of the Lord. And I love what chiding means. Chiding means active discipline rooted in the person of Jesus. So active discipline rooted in correcting to holiness. Now, I don't know how many of you have tried to do this. We don't go there too much, but after the third time of asking our kids to clean their room, I may or may not say, I bet Jesus' room was always clean. You don't want to do that because biblically I don't know if it's accurate, but also understand that you don't want to use Jesus as kind of a slam that way. And you don't want to use that as a guilt. But it's, hey, we are your parents. We're asking you to clean your room. And part of what it means to be a believer is to honor your parents. So it would honor me greatly if you would clean your room. That's more the way I feel like it should be done. Because the Jesus guilt doesn't always work, right? And it may mess some kids up far along the way later in life. But understand that active discipline, just because you're saved doesn't mean you get away with it. Just because you're saved doesn't mean there aren't consequences for bad choices. Some people have that weird understanding of Christianity that I can do whatever I want. I'm a believer. I'm saved. I'm good. We're reformed. We can't lose our salvation, so I'm going to do whatever I can. Go back 2 weeks where we started talking about false conversions and what that looks like. Do you not think God knows what you're doing? God is the ultimate parent. God understands what you're going to do before you do it. Though we try, we're getting kind of good at it. Sometimes we're way off. God's not. God sees it. God knows. God understands. And then we could turn, well, if God does, then why does he let me do it? How would that always work in your household? Your kids would never do anything. Your kids would probably be in their room by themselves forever. And some of you are like, good, I'll sign on to that. No, that's not how it's supposed to go, because we're supposed to walk things out. We trust and obey. Hopefully my boys trust that we have their best, their livelihood, that for the best for them in our hearts as we make decisions. Hopefully you do for your kids. The Bible makes that very clear. But one day we're gonna have to trust that they're going to trust and obey. And that's where we bring back to little Morgan. She's asleep, huh? Yep. Morgan's a baby right now. She doesn't understand what it means to trust and obey. But she's going to learn. She's got a Han blood in her. She's going to learn real fast. But understand that what her parents are going to try to do is to teach her about the grace that is given through Jesus. What hopefully this church tries to do as she grows up is to teach them about salvation in Jesus and what it means to trust and obey. Because I think we would all agree, because you all said it, that we want her to be happy in Jesus. So then we need to teach her to trust and to obey. Now, this is part 1 of the helper. Part 2 takes it the rest of the way next week. Let's pray.